Hello everybody, lifespan development. Today under this we are going to deal with the topic neonatal period. The objective of this lesson is to understand the infant growth and development, to understand about reflexes and to understand the sensory perceptual development in the neonatal period. Neonatal period means the period which extends from the birth through the first month of life. During this time, the newborn baby undergoes a lot of physiological and anatomical changes as it adapts to his or her new environment. During the neonatal period, the newborn's baby body learns to breathe air, it learns to nurse, digest milk, to excrete waste and learns to control its body temperature. What happens during this prenatal period and the earliest months of the child's early period of life has a lasting impact on the life course journey. In the earliest moments or the months or the years, the interaction with the parents, the interaction with the family members and other adults and children influences the way the brain develops. And like other factors like the nutrition and environmental safety also affect the development of the brain of the neonates. Although it is never too late to improve the health and well-being, what happens during the infancy and toddlerhood, it sets the stage for journey through the childhood, adolescence and the later adulthood. The newborn babies depend on others for the basic physical needs. They must be fed, cleaned and kept safe, comfortable until they develop the ability to do these things for themselves. At the same time, however, newborn babies have an amazing set of physical abilities and potential right from the beginning of the birth. In terms of weight, most newborn babies weigh about 5 to 10 pounds at birth. Infants triple their birth weight in the first year, and by the age of 2 years, most of the infants are quadruple their original weight. Thus, the average 2-year-old will be weighing around 20 to 40 pounds. Evidently, the size of the individual infants or the toddlers can vary quite a bit. Some of the differences is because of the nutrition, exposed to the diseases and other environmental factors, and also because of the genetics. Self-regulation. Before birth, the body functions of the fetus are regulated by the mother's body. After birth, the infant must develop the capacity to engage in self-regulation. At first, the challenge is to regulate the bodily functions such as controlling the temperature of the body and sleeping, eating and eliminating. A newborn usually sleeps for 16 hours a day, dividing the time evenly between the day and night. At the end of 3 months, most of the infants are sleeping 14 to 15 hours per day, primarily at night with some well-defined nap times during the daytime. Then comes the sensory abilities of the neonates. A full-term infant are born with a functioning sensory system, that is the sense of hearing, sight, taste, smell, touch and sensitivity to the pain, and these abilities continue to develop rapidly in the first few months of the life. Indeed, in the early months, the sensory systems function at a higher level than the motor system, which also allows the movement of the body. Then the sensory system allows the infant from the time of the birth to participate in and adopt according to their environments. Hearing is the earliest link to the environment. In the uterus, the fetus is sensitive to the auditory stimulation. Newborn babies show a preference for their mother voices over other female voices. The newborn baby's vision improves rapidly during the first 4 months of life. By about the age of 4 months, the infant sees the objects the same way that an adult would. Of course, infants do not have the same cognitive association with the objects that an adult has. The infants respond to a number of visual dimensions, including the depth, brightness, movement, color, and distance. Human faces have a particular appeal for the newborn infants. Taste and smell. Taste and smell begin to function in the uterus itself, and the newborn babies can differentiate between the sweet, bitter, sour, and salty tastes. Both animal and human research tells us that touch plays a very important role in infant development. Young infants use their mouths for exploring their world, but by the age of 6 months, the infants can make a controlled use of their hands to explore their environment. So, this is about the neonatal development during the first month of the life, which are very important. Although dependent on others, newborns are equipped from the start with the tools for survival that are involuntary responses to the simple stimulus, which we call as reflexes. Reflexes help the infants in adapting to the environment outside the womb. Neonatal reflexes are inborn reflexes which are present at the birth and occur in a predictable fashion. Normally, a newborn baby should respond to stimuli with these reflexes, which eventually becomes inhibited as the child matures. Newborns have two critical reflexes. What are they? The rooting reflex. When infants' cheeks or the corners of their mouth are gently stroked with a finger, they will turn their heads in the direction of the touch and open their mouths. This is an attempt to suck the finger. This reflex of the infants helps them in feeding because it guides the infants to the nipple. The second important reflex is the sucking reflex. When nipple or some other suckable object is presented to the infant instantly sucks it. This reflex is another important tool for feeding. Both the rooting reflex and sucking reflex, they disappear between 2 to 4 months of age. Reflexes are important in evaluation of neurological functioning. The absence of this reflex can indicate that there is some serious developmental disorder with the newborn baby. Let us see some other reflexes which are present in the newborn babies. Moro reflex. This reflex is stimulated by sudden movement or loud noise. Normally, developing neonate will respond by throwing out the arms and legs and then pulling them towards the body. This emerges between 8 to 9 weeks in the uterus. Then the next reflex is the palmar grasp reflex. It is stimulated when an object is placed in the baby's palm. Normally, developing neonate responds by grasping the object. This reflex emerges with 11 weeks in the utero and is inhibited by 2 to 3 months after birth. Then the next important reflex is the Babinski reflex. This reflex is stimulated by stroking the sole of the foot. The toes of the foot should fan out. The foot itself should curl in. This reflex emerges at the 18th week in the utero and disappears by the end of the 6 months after the birth of the child. The next important reflex is stepping reflex. The neonate will make walking motions with the legs and feet when held in an upright position with the feet touching the ground. This reflex appears at birth and lasts for 3 to 4 months. Then this reflex again reappears at 12 to 24 months of the age. This is all about the reflexes which should be present in a neonate. If these reflexes are not present, then there is something serious developmental disorder is associated with the neonatal development. arrival of newborn is highly vulnerable period during which many psychological, physiological adjustment to the extrauterine life must be made. When a baby is born, an orderly changes occurs from the fetal life to extrauterine life. It includes the physical, psychological, psychosexual and cognitive changes. These changes are most prominent from 1 year of the age, even though it itself starts from the neonatal period. Growth is an orderly process and occurs in a systematic fashion. The rates and patterns of growth are specific to certain parts of the body. Wide individual differences do exist in the growth rates. Growth and development are influenced by a number of factors. Development proceeds from simple to complex and from general to specific. Development occurs from a specific faction, that is from cephalocaudal or proximodistal progression. There are critical periods also in growth and development. The rates in development vary from child to child. The development continues throughout the individual's lifespan. Now, let us have a look at the physical development taking place during the neonatal period. The infants and the toddlers, infants is from the birth to 1 year of the age and toddlers from 1 to 2 years. They grow very quickly and bodily changes are rapid and profound. The physical development refers to the biological changes that the infant undergoes as they age. Important aspect that determines the progress of physical development during the neonatal is the physical and the brain changes. Development of reflexes, the motor skills, sensations, perceptions, learning skills and also the health issues. The first 4 weeks of life are termed as a neonatal period. Most babies, as we have understood, they weigh between 5 to 10 pounds and are about 18 to 22 inches long. Male babies are generally slightly heavier and slightly longer than the female babies. The neonate baby born weighing less than 5.5 pounds are termed as low birth weight babies. The infants who arrive before the due date are called as premature or preterm mature babies. These babies may or may not have the low birth weight. The babies who arrive shortly after the due date are called as the full term infants. The infants who arrive 2 or more weeks after their due date are called as the post mature infants. Both premature and post-mature infants are at a higher risk of complications. The physical growth is especially rapid during the first years of their life. An infant's birth weight generally should double by 6 months and triple by the first birthday. Similarly, a baby grows between 10 to 12 inches in length and the baby's proportion changes during the first 2 years of life. The size of an infant set decreases in proportion from 1/3 of the entire body at the birth to 1/4 by the age of 2 years and 1/8 by the adulthood. The fetal and neonatal brain development are also rapid. The lower or the subcortical areas of the brain, they develop first, followed by the higher areas or the cortical areas. Most brain changes occur prenatally and soon after birth. At birth, the neonate brain weighs only 25% of that of an adult brain. By the end of second year, the brain weighs about 80% and by puberty, it weighs nearly 100% of that an adult brain. So, this is about the growth and development during the neonatal period. The infant gradually advances from the reflex functioning to motor functioning. The development of motor skills, that is the ability to move and manipulate, occur more or less orderly and in a logical sequence. It begins with simple actions such as lifting the chin, and progress to a more complex acts like walking, running, throwing. The infants usually crawl before they walk. The motor development is somewhat predictable in what children tend to reach these milestones at the same age and in the same sequence. The development of the motor skills, that is most of the other type of skills for that matters, it is a continuous process. The children progress from the broad capacities to more specific and refined abilities. For example, the infants progress from eating cereals with their fingers to eating with a spoon. This is about the motor skill development in infants. Now, let us see the sensation and perception development. Normally, infants are capable of sensation, or it is the ability to respond to the sensory information in the external world. These infants are born with the functioning sensory organs, specialized structures of the body containing the receptors which receive stimuli from the environment. The sensory receptors convert the environmental energy into nervous system signals that brain can understand and interpret. The newborns are very nearsighted, but their visual acuity or the ability develops very quickly. Although the infant's vision is not as good as adult vision, the babies may respond visually to their surroundings from birth. The infants are particularly attracted to the objects of light and dark contrast, such as the human face. Depth perception also comes within few months after the birth. The newborn babies also respond to the taste, the smell and sounds, especially the sound of human voice. In fact, newborn babies almost immediately distinguish between the primary caregiver and others on the basis of the sight, sound and smell. The infant's sensory abilities improve considerably during the first years of the life. Perception. Perception is a psychological process by which the human brain processes the sensory data collected by the sensory organs. Visually, infants are aware of depth, that is the relationship between the foreground and the background, the size and shape consistency, that consistent size and shape of the objects. This later ability is necessary for the infants to learn about the events and objects. This is about the sensory perceptual development that takes place during the neonatal period. As the brain develops, so does its ability to process and store information and to solve problems. These abilities are known as cognition. When we talk about how fast the child is learning, we are talking about the cognitive development. Researchers now describe the infants as weird to learning and agree that the infants have an intrinsic drive to learn and to be in interaction with their environment. A central element of the cognition is language, which facilitates both thinking and communicating. Piaget's stages of cognitive development. To assess the children's cognitive progress, many people use the concepts developed by the best known cognitive development theorist, none other than Jean Piaget. Piaget believed that cognitive development occurs in successive changes or successive stages determined by the age of the child. His overall contention that as the child grows and develops, the cognitive changes not only changes in quantitative but also qualitative. The first stage is the sensory motor stage. At this stage, the infants developed can look only at one frame of the movie at a time. When the next picture appears on the screen, the infant focuses on it and cannot go back to the previous ones. Piaget suggests that the infants and toddlers' cognitive development occurs in 6 substages during the sensory motor period. The first one is the reflex activity. Because reflexes are what the infants can do during the neonatal period, they become the foundation for the future learning. Reflexes are what the infants build upon. The second substage is the primary circular reactions. During this stage, the infant repeats the behavior that brings them a positive response and pleasure. The infant's body is the focus of the response. Thus, the term primary, if for example, the infants chants, hold their head erect or lift their chest up, they will continue to repeat these acts because they are pleasurable. Then the third substage is the secondary circular reactions. As in the second substage, the focus here is also on performing the acts and behavior that brings about a response. In this stage, however, the infant reacts to the responses from the environment also. Then the next substage, that is the substage 4, is coordination of secondary circular reactions. The mastery of the object permanence is a significant task during this stage. Piaget's contend that around 9 months of age, the infants develop the ability to understand that an object or a person exists even if they do not see it. Piaget demonstrated this ability by hiding a favorite toy under a blanket. The infants are able to move the blanket and retrieve the toy. The object permanence is related to the rapid development of memory abilities during this period. Then the fifth substage is the tertiary circular reactions. During this stage, the toddlers become more creative in eliciting the responses and are better problem solvers. Then the last substage in the sensory motor stage is the mental representation. Piaget describes this stage of the infants as actually able to use the thinking skills in that they retain the mental images of what is not immediately in front of them. Let us now move on to see the pre-language skills, which is also a part of cognitive development. The infants communicate with their caretakers from the beginning. Through crying, the language development truly begins around 2 months of the age. The first sounds are the cooing. They are pleasing to most of the parents. By the age of 4 months, the infants babble. Initially, these babbles are unrecognizable. Eventually, between 8 to 12 months, the infants make gestures to indicate their desires. The babble sounds and gestures together, along with the caretaker's growing familiarity with the infant's vocabulary, make it easier for the infants to communicate their desires. By the age of 18 to 24 months, the toddler can speak around 50 to 200 words. Piaget asserts that the children develop language in a direct correlation to their cognitive skills. Thus, most of the words spoken at this age relate to the people and the significant objects in the child's environment. These words like mama, dada, cat are some of the few example words. The infant first word also include situational words like hot, no and bye. Between 22 and 26 months, the toddlers begin to combine two words together, also because of their growing cognitive abilities. The children can all say all gone as they develop the understanding of the object permanence. So, this is all about the cognitive development. The toddlers and infants, they face a vital developmental task in emotional area as well as in the social area. The development during these early ages may set a stage for socio-emotional development during all other developmental ages. The Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Erikson's theory explains the socio-emotional development in terms of 8 consecutive age-defined stages of emotional development. each stage requires the mastery of a developmental task. The mastery at each stage depends upon the mastery of the previous stages. If the task facilitating factors for a stage are absent, the individual becomes stuck in that stage of development. So, the Erikson's emotional development, the first stage, that is the developmental stage of for the neonates and infancy, is trust versus mistrust. The overall task of this stage is for the infant to develop a sense that their needs will be met by the outside world and that the outside world is okay place to be in. In addition, the infant develops an emotional bond with an adult, which Erikson believes to becomes a foundation for being able to form a intimate, loving relationships for the future. Erikson argues that the need for a consistent mother figure to be present in this trust versus mistrust stage of the socio-emotional development of the infant. So, not only this, the health of the infant is also a very important factor. Normal functioning of the newborn's various body system is vital for the short term and long term health development. Less than 1% of the babies experience the birth trauma or injury that can occur during the birth. Most of the babies tend to be rather hardy or able to compensate for less than ideal situation in the early years of their lives. Nevertheless, some children are born with or exposed to conditions that pose greater challenges. For example, you can take phenylketonuria. It is an inherited medical disorder in which the child lacks phenylalanine hydroxylase. This is an enzyme which is very necessary to eliminate the excess phenylalanine, which is an amino acid which is essential for the human body. Poor nutrition, hygiene, poor medical care also expose the child to unnecessary unhealthy risks. The parents need to ensure that their infant eats well, is clean and receives adequate medical attention. For instance, proper immunization, which is very critical to prevent number of diseases like diphtheria, measles, mumps, rubella and polio. A licensed healthcare specialist can provide the parents with the charts which gives a detailed recommendations on the immunization. So, today we have learnt about the neonatal period, how this neonatal period, which is from the birth to the early months of the life, is very important for the growth and development. We also have learned about the reflexes, which are the foundations for the future learning and development of the infant. And also we have understood about the cognitive and the socio-emotional development, which also very important during the early periods of the life. Not only this, we have also understood how the health is very important and how unhealthy environment and other diseases can affect the future development of the infants. Hope you have understood the lesson. Thank you.